Hello, this is Wes Bridle, and this is another Kingdom Calling Economic Update. We're going to do a series of 3. We're going to focus on this one on indications that we're going to have a big crash across different markets. We're going to do another one on inflationary points. And finally, we're going to talk about gold. There was a big hearing last week about gold. So this is basically the news, the financial news I've seen in the last week and a half that I think is worth noting. As always, this is extra information on the coming storm, which we did in November, which talks about the massive financial economic problems we're going to have in this country. And so I encourage you to go look at that. There should be a link near this video for more full information. But this is just the play-by-play. So let's jump into it. Robert Shiller, the Yale economist who predicted the 2000 stock market crash, recently said that the stock markets are overvalued and markets could tumble again. So it's another one predicting a downturn. And Jim Rickards is another new China bear. He called it the greatest bubble in history. China's kind of the engine that is driving the world economy right now. And if it is a bubble, which it appears to be, that there's not real economic growth there, but a lot of just hype going on, that when that pops, that will be just difficult for the entire world economy. Most of my points here for this session are going to be on housing. We had numbers come out recently. We had last month the lowest home sales in history, which is just since 1963, but at an annualized pace of 308,000 home sales. This is an incredibly low number. And that's with the government giving away a ton of money, buying mortgages, doing everything that they possibly can to stimulate the housing market. 1/2 of U.S. home borrowers who get loan modifications, it's kind of an interesting stat, half of people who get loan modifications are defaulting after 9 months. So again, this is more, it always sounds good when the government steps in to help people by doing these different things, but almost always what happens is they just prolong the situation, they prolong a bad situation and make it end up being worse. And we see that with these loan modifications. People end up defaulting anyways down the road, but instead of just the problem being cleaned out and us being able to move on, it's delaying the inevitable. And so we're seeing that in housing. There are 7.1 seriously delinquent mortgages for every foreclosure that's going on in our economy right now. So for every one that's actually getting foreclosed and moved on, there are 7 that the banks just aren't going through foreclosure. They're leaving it out. And we've talked in past updates about the fact that banks have really bad balance sheets, and they want to hide that fact so they're not foreclosing on these homes. Again, we've just got a big delay process where this typhoon that's going to hit, no one wants to see it hit today, and so they're delaying it, and we're not seeing that coming forth. But the problems are still out there. And ironically, with all this, home sales are up 5.2. Home sale prices are up 5.2%. You might think with all these problems in the housing market that prices would be down, but they're actually up. So anyone who says there's no inflation, there's tremendous signs of inflation. It might just not be where you would think. With such horrible housing market numbers, prices should be way down. The fact that they're up is just very interesting. There's a very interesting graph that came out last week, and it talked about the debt saturation. I forget the guy's name. He kept pointing out swarmusa.com, I think. I didn't even go there, but he put out a good graph showing that with Keynesian economics, the idea is that when the government borrows money it doesn't have and puts it into the economy, that it will produce growth. In decades ago, it actually produced pretty good growth, so that if the government borrowed $1 and they put that into the economy, that we would have 90 cents of GDP growth. So they would only lose about 10 cents. But the graph showed that over time it has less and less of an effect, and we're now at the point where for every dollar the government spends, there's a negative 45-cent return on the GDP. So we're past this point of debt saturation where it's actually worsening the economy when the government continues to borrow money and spend it. And so that's the only thing they know how to do, so they continue to try to do this. But this chart was pretty interesting. It shows it's not only is it not working, it's actually hurting. And finally, I wanted to to end with Sir John Templeton. He died in 2008. In 2005, he put out a letter that he wanted the world to see, and it ended up getting put in a drawer. But he talked about the financial chaos that we were going to experience for years to come. So he was kind of prophetic because he talked about the things that were going to happen, and some of them have already happened. And he also talked about much worse times ahead. Sir John Templeton, if you're not familiar, is maybe the greatest investor over the last century. He was a believer and became very involved with his faith and his charities later on in life. But I'm just going to read a little bit of the letter that he put out. Increasingly often people ask my opinion on what is likely to happen financially. I am now thinking that the dangers are more numerous and larger than ever before in my lifetime. Quite likely in the early months of 2005, the peak of prosperity is behind us. In the past century, protection could be obtained by keeping your net worth in cash or government bonds. Now the surplus capacities are so great that most currencies and bonds are likely to continue losing their purchase power. Well, that actually, I guess, leads into our next video, which is going to be on hyperinflationary points. There's a lot happening out there. When that hits us, it will be like a hammer that we don't see coming. But I'm trying to give you the information that it is coming so that you can prepare. Again, to get the full context of what's going on, I encourage you to hit the link near this video and go watch The Coming Storm. It's an hour-and-a-half presentation that we put on in November that talks about the full story of what's happening here. Thank you for being a part of this video. I appreciate it, and God bless you.